familiar with the subject that I'll be talking about, please consider it as merely sort of going through what you have already learned. And I do hope I can add something new to whatever you have learned. Many of you have experienced, you have done in Thailand, in other countries too. But so I just want to share with you what I think are important issues. So this is the beginning of a course, and I had requested Oxford Seattle to give me about 9 weeks. So it'll be a 9-week course on research perspective. So this is the beginning of the first course, and I will try to walk you through the program, the outline of the course itself, so that you can prepare yourself, you can plan yourself. And I think especially for those that are writing your thesis and dissertations, I think this would be very important because you can then use the content of my presentations to help you in writing your thesis and dissertation. After this course, I would make sure that you have all these slides with you so that you can read them, you can review them, and you can reflect them at your leisure. Let me first start with Einstein, because although you are a social scientist, I'm a social scientist, but I still believe that we are scientists at heart. If we knew what we were doing, it would not be called research, would it? So the fact that we do research is not because we know what we're doing. We are doing research because we do not know what we are doing. That is research. If you know already what you are doing, you don't need research. So please let us make sure that all of us understand that the research and the basic of research is when we are not sure what we are doing. So the question is, it is a quest for knowledge. It is a quest for wisdom. It is a quest for insight. It is a search. We are not sure of the answers. We are never sure that we would find the right answers. But in the end, and I think as most of us are Buddhists, what is important is the search. It is a journey, not the destination. So please do not think only of your thesis, only of your dissertation, but please think of the process you would undergo through. This is a very particularly challenging, very particularly exciting process that all the candidates at the both master's, MPhil, and PhD level that you are going through. So let me first think of the learning outcomes. What I want all of you from this 9-week course is to think, to learn, to interact with one another, and also to communicate what you have learned. We are not only academics. We are not only intellectuals. We have to think, we have to learn, we have to interact, and we have to share what we know. We have to communicate. So it's very important that all of us have a common understanding of the learning outcomes of this 9-week program. Now, the professors, the supervisors at SSBU, especially the rector, the Oxford Seattle, knows about this Bloom taxonomy. But what do we do when you give a lecture or seminar? The first is we want to ensure that the audience, the students, remember what we're saying, that the students are able to recall and recognize the facts. Remembering is what we start off with. The next stage is understanding. The students must understand what the facts mean. The students then will try to apply what they have learned in the seminars. They need to apply the facts, the rules, the concepts, and ideas. Then they have to analyze what they have learned. And it's important to evaluate. And hopefully the last stage is to recreate a new whole. So this is a path of a learning process that has 6 steps. We start off remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. So I would like to remind the professors at SSBU, the lecturers at SSBU, that the goal of whatever we do in teaching is to ensure that we go through the 6 steps. We have to make sure that it is not enough just to remember understanding. They need to apply, they need to analyze, they need to evaluate, and finally, hopefully, they need to recreate something new out of these teachings and out of these learnings. So let me first go through the first portion of my course, which is the introduction. It'll be something that most of you already know, as you have already done your research. Most of you have PhDs, masters. But let me remind you what we are all about. The question then becomes, let me start again. Mm-hmm. 1 second, please. What I will try to do, and I think I will take time on this, to really help you understand the entire research process. As Ciara told me, most of you are engaged in research projects. So I would also try to help you walk through the steps to plan and to design research project. So there are 2 elements, the research process and the research project. Many of you are interested because you'll be submitting the thesis or dissertation, which is a research project. To achieve this, you need to go through a systematic and thorough research process. So please make the distinction between the process and the project itself. The course outline, I would like to make sure that all of us, yourself, myself, understand the course, the 9-week course that I have developed. We need to have a different perspective. In research, there are different ways and different views and different thinking of how research is done. You would read many books. I'm sure there are many books at SSBU which will tell you how research is done from different perspectives. I would also make sure that you would look into whether you are operating as an insider or outsider. Are you looking at research within the institution, in the organization, or are you as an outsider looking into something that you do not know? The third issue is ethical process. I would like all of you and all of us to understand, to appreciate that there are ethical underlines and ethical processes behind research. You cannot just do research and get away with it. You have to understand, you have to know what are the ethical practices and principles of doing research. I would then talk about research strategy and design, because we need to understand very carefully what is the difference between a research strategy, which will then be translated into research design. So research is not just doing it in your own fancy way. You have to follow and adopt a proper research strategy, which is then translated into a research design. What is very important for students and supervisors is what is the research problem that you are investigating. The question of research problem becomes, critically important. So I would like to touch upon these topics. First will be the research perspective, research as an outsider or insider. Do you work within the institutions? Do you live in the community and then do research? Or you just come in and then investigate as an outsider? I will talk about deciding what to research. At SSBU and in other universities, there's a whole wealth of information. There are many areas that you can do research. So the question is, you have to decide what you are willing to invest time and effort in to do research. So decision is very important. Please do not do what someone tells you to do. It must be a personal decision. It must be a choice that you made on your own, rather than be forced to do something that you are not interested in. So the decision is very important. What do you want to do research on? Ethics is critically important, as I have mentioned. Then I would spend some time on how do you develop research questions. Research is not giving answers, but research is raising research questions. And then we'll talk about research strategy. How do you go about research? How do you plan your research? I then talk about research design. After planning, how do you actually do it? How do you design your research? This is very important for supervisors as well as supervisees. And then, number 8 is something that was raised last week by one of the participants. What is the research methodology? What is the difference between research methods and research methodologies? We have to be very clear of the basic distinctions between research methods and research methodologies. Finally, research hypothesis. Research is nothing but based on hypotheses. These are statements, these are assumptions that the researcher makes. And whatever we do in research is to prove or disprove the research hypothesis. So I hope you would understand the critical importance of developing a proper research hypothesis. And of course, I will conclude. So I've designed this course around a 9-week. So every week from now onwards, we would address these issues that I've mentioned to you. There will be 3 parts in the course. Session 1 and 2, I would look at different perspectives. I would look at the why are we doing research? The question is why? Why do you want to do research? Please do not tell me, I want to do research because I want to have a degree. That is not enough. We are here to do research because we want to generate new knowledge. Research is nothing but generating new knowledge. We want to know new things that no one has ever thought of. This is what we want to do. This is what research means. And then I will talk about different elements of research which are important, which you must be mindful, which we then develop research strategy, plan of action. This is the what. So please remember, we would need to understand the why of research as well as the what of research, and finally, the how of research. So 3 things: the what, the how, and the how of research. So 3 questions. Why do you do research? What does research mean, and how do you do it? So these are the issues that I'll be addressing in this 9 sections. So please bear with me. If you have any question, immediately after, I would have enough time for you to ask and raise issues. because I want to ensure that we have a common and shared understanding of research means after this 9-week program. The question is, we need to first take steps in research project. I'm sure some of you have already done it. I'm sure some of you already identified research problems and research questions. You have to have a very clear idea of what you want to investigate and what are the questions that you want to address in your research work. So based on this, let me start with session 1, which is research perspectives. It's very theoretical, but I think we as researchers, we need to have a good understanding of different research perspectives that we need as we go through the research. The first kind is what is called the exploratory research. We want to explore what we do not know. So exploratory research means we are looking into something which very little is known about, that we do not know the subject, we do not know the topic. So we are there to explore, we're there to discover. We have an idea. The supervisors give you some ideas. You yourself, through your reading, through your teaching and learning, you observe something that you are interested to learn more about. This is the type of research which we call exploratory research. I will focus on them in detail later when we talk about research methodologies. We would use observation methods, interview methods, surveys that we are often very well acquainted when we do exploratory research. Exploratory research is to collect and gather preliminary information. In contrast to exploratory, we then have a different type of research, which is explanatory research, which means it explains relationship. It is not exploring, it is to explain. And therefore, you have a better understanding of what is going on. You test hypotheses. You look at the cause and effect relationship, if-then relationships. And then these are statements you are tested during research. You have a hypothesis, which you then test through the explanatory research. Then the third kind is explanatory or descriptive research, whereby you describe what is happening in more detail. It is more explanatory. You go much deeper into the subject based on the initial understanding that you get either from the explanatory or exploratory research. Research perspective, and this is very important, I think for supervisors too. You can either take a deductive process or the inductive process when we do research. The basic tools are explanatory and exploratory research. And here, let me share with you a slide which is very important. In inductive research, we start with observation. We then see the patterns. We then developed hypotheses, and then we come up with the theory. So based on observations, you then try to investigate the patterns, and then you develop the hypothesis, and then you come up with the theory. This is the inductive. In contrast, deductive, you start with the theory first. Based on the theory, you go into hypothesis, then you do your observations, and then you come with the pattern of this. So you can use both approaches. You can use either deductive or inductive research when you do your studies. So the question is, I would like to caution you that descriptive research is not enough. You are doing your master's or PhD. You cannot just write a paper in any way, fashion. It must add to current knowledge. So you have to go deeper. Academic research takes more time and effort. That will be critical. The question is, this is again a theoretical issue. Do we use research as objective or subjective? This determines the questions you raise, the type of data you collect, the methods of data collection and conclusion. This is what the supervisors would have to guide the supervisors in trying to take the objective or subjective research. The objective research is that the researcher believes that there's an objective world that we can investigate. We can know about the tree of reality. It is not dependent on who is doing the research. It is there objectively. Whether you are doing research, it doesn't really matter. Who does is not matter. It is there. It is objectively identifiable, objectively definable. It is based on natural sciences, chemists, physicists, bioengineering. They use experiments of very large-scale surveys. They then develop law-like generalization because they are using the objective type of research. It is very positivism. Its data is very hard data. You can do statistical analysis. You can develop quantitative methodologies because you have very strong data and numbers. This is objective research. In contrast, you have subjective research, where you, as a researcher, influence and determine. You are not detached, you are involved. So this is called phenomenological type of research. Your perspective is important. You bring your own bias. You bring your own personal perspective in doing the research. So the question then is, you look at the events, you use interviews, you use documents. I'm sure at SSBU, many of you are doing research using the documents and examination. And therefore, the researcher used his or her own personal interpretations in collecting and analyzing the data that is collected. And therefore, we have two types. The objective type of research. Both are important. Both can be used in doing your research. Therefore, in terms of objectivity, we always examine, is it true? In terms of subjectivity, what does it do? How can it be used? Because we are interested from a personal perspective when we do your subjective research. So here, I would like, if I may, ask you to do an activity, a research activity, which you cannot do it just now, but please note what I want you to do. I hope you can use please look into the library. Please look into any peer-reviewed journals, and please read 2 articles on the research topic that you are interested in. It is a library research. I want you to look at 2 articles. Any article that you have at SSBU on any topic that you are interested in. And based on this, I want you to answer the following questions. This is the beginning of our journey in doing research. Read the article, any article you find interesting. It can be on any topic, but then try to look at what are the different ways between the different studies. What is the focus of each of the research article? Please try to compare them and to see what are the differences. What does the researcher? Are they using subjective? Are they using objective? Are they using different types of research perspective? It is for you to examine what they have done and to reflect by reading not just the content, but I'm more interested in the research perspective. Are they doing the objective type of research, or are they doing the subjective type of research? And look at the words, sentence, questions that you use to examine the approach taken by the authors. What are the approaches that you think each author in writing the research articles that they are using? It is a short exercise. I just want to make sure that you are starting this research journey by doing the literature research. Now I turn to something that I want to share with you, because you at SSBU, especially the supervisors, especially the professors, you are promoting creative scholarship. Please do not forget, in the Burmese word, scholarship has a different connotation. I'm not using the Burmese word of scholarship. Scholarship means stipend or award. I'm talking about scholarship as an activity, academic activity. We as scholars, academic scholars, we need to be creative. So I will try to address the creativity of scholarship in doing research. I like this very much. I'm sure all of you knows about Madame Curie, the famous chemist. Nothing in life is to be feared. She encouraged us. It is only to be understood. That is why research is to understand more and to fear less. I like this quotation very much. We must not be afraid, but we must be willing to understand. That is the whole purpose of research. So the question is, I hope all of you as SSBU, under the leadership of Oxford Seattle, is pursuing research interests. You are learning something new. You are solving problems. You challenge yourself in new ways. I think the challenging part is very important. As Buddhists, we must challenge. We must challenge the assumptions. We must challenge and work in new ways. Now, many of you, especially the supervisors, CROs, you are initiating research project. Therefore, I would like to remind the students that it is an excellent opportunity to work closely with a mentor, something you look up to. If your supervisor is Oxford Seattle, if your supervisor is someone who you admire, then it is an excellent opportunity. However, if it is initiated by yourself, self-initiated, then it's based on your own personal interests. You can give real contribution to knowledge. And therefore, I hope all the students listening, please take the opportunity to get hands-on experience, work closely with your supervisor and other students, try to get credit, scholarship, stipends. And in doing research, please also develop and hone your leadership and teamwork skills. Because as researchers, we are not alone. We work together with others. That is important. Of course, you are doing research because you want to get a master's degree or MPhil or PhD. But I think it is also important that doing research, you get valuable life skills. You are able to communicate, as Ciara mentioned the other day. You are able to analyze and you are able to criticize. That is creative scholarship. You have deeper understanding, and I'll be sharing with you later in more depth of research hypothesis. You are able to publish. Publication is our ultimate goal. After we do research, we must publish. That is the goal of creative scholarship. Sometimes we work alone. Sometimes we work in large teams. We work in libraries. We work in museums. We work in communities. These are research experiences we gather. But the three requirements I would like to share with you. Whenever you do research, the first thing, it must be original. You must not copycat someone else. You must do research which no one has done before. It must be original. I think that requirement is very, very important. The second requirement, it must be creative. You must develop something new. You are like an artist. You are like a painter. You are like a musician. You are like a composer. Whatever you do in terms of research must be creative. And finally, you must be innovative. You must do something new. You must not just copy what others have done. You must not always follow the old ways of doing research. It must be innovative. And therefore, whatever you do, let us not forget, it is intellectual output within the academic discipline that you have. Originality, that is very important. Examiners, let me remind those CROs who are examiners, you have a very important position. You have a very important role to play because you must make sure that the research is original. You have the responsibility to make judgment because you represent the academic community. You cannot just say, oh, it is okay. You must be very strict in terms of the originality. Quality of research is very important. Quality of research, it must be of original thought. Design must be different, synthesis implications. These must be presented in a very original way. We look at different methods. You look at new data. You look at new questions, new ideas. That is originality. Of course, there is no universal definition. But we must make sure when we do research, everything must lead to originality. Of course, when we talk about originality, we always think about science, technology, engineering, mathematics. We talk about arts and science, we are also original because we do not have machines or technology, but we do have intellectual originality. Therefore, in natural science, they produce new findings. In our social science and Buddhist studies, humanities, we use different approaches, new theories, new data, new topics. That is our originality. And I do hope, professors at SSBU, you promote and encourage originality in the way you approach research problems. It is essential. We look at the thesis. We look at the long-term impact. Once the research is over, it must be published and it must be original. And therefore, we always balance the new and the old. There must be variation. It is a process as well as a product. The way to research should be original, and the outcome of research should also be original. Of course, creativity is to fulfill potential. It has the inherent drive or capacity. It is original, it is relevant. It also means something fresh. You come with something creative, something no one has thought of. A different color, a different tone, a different position. That is creativity. And therefore, we look at deep within yourself to come up with something creative, like a composer, like a pianist, like an artist. That is very important. Please do not think only of your thesis. Look at, to be creative, it depends on the candidates, PhD candidates, master candidates. You must be responsible. You must be independent scholars. That is important. So there are two creativity, the big C and the pro C, professional creativity. We must exercise both types of creativity. And therefore, we have, if the research you do is novel and relevant, in both cases, it becomes original, a creativity. If what you do is novel but not relevant, it is original. So these are the classifications you can make. But what I would like to discourage you is replication, doing what others have already done, which means it is neither novel nor it is relevant. That is something we must avoid. Innovation, we must look at how do we apply what we have learned. This is very important in the cultural and social context. And finally, this is what I want to capture. Originality must be novel and significant. Creativity means novel and relevance. And finally, innovation means problem-solving application. I've spent 3 subsections in my first course. Now, finally, this is for the supervisors and supervisees. This is for Oxford CRO too, because SSBU is promoting postgraduate education, either at the master's level or at the doctoral PhD level. So what does it mean? I'm trying to give my personal interpretation. Your understanding might not be the same as my understanding, but just let me share with you what postgraduate education to me means. Postgraduate education is 3 things: patience, knowledge, and a lot of research. If you are taking a master's program, if you're doing a doctoral thesis, you must have the patience, you must have the knowledge, and you must be willing and able to do a lot of research. Unless you are able to do this, this will not be helpful. Postgraduate, you are obliged, you have the obligation to produce original knowledge. There are risks when you do postgraduate. You might not get it. You are never assured that you become a doctor. There's always the risk. But I'm sure SSBU, the rector Oxford CRO, is encouraging the culture of risk-taking. Therefore, we must create a culture at SSBU, that SSBU is the center of excellence, a culture of research, a culture of originality. Therefore, risk-taking, I would like to encourage the supervisors, please give your students the choice to choose their own topics, even it means risk involved, so that they are making sure that their research is novel and creative. The students must be encouraged to have the confidence and the courage to take risks, to make mistakes. I would like to encourage the teachers at SSBU, please allow your students to make mistakes. I always encourage my students to make mistakes. If you do not make mistakes, you are not learning anything. If you are not having failures, you are not learning. We learn through mistakes. We learn through failures. Please encourage them to invent and reinvent knowledge. I talk about learning, unlearning, and relearning. We must encourage our students to do this. It is lifelong. Please make sure that they do not stop after they finish the thesis. Oh, I've done my doctorate. I've got a PhD now. I will stop learning. That is wasteful. Lifelong inquiry is what we are all about. We must be passionate about what we're doing. We need to look risk with originality, creativity. The supervisor would help you, the students, to manage risk constructively. We have to make sure, how do we look at risk and how does it manifest itself? The risk, of course, the higher goals you have, the more the risks are. If you want your thesis to be the best thesis in the world, you would have to take risks. It is also between your own perspective and what the larger community, what SSBU expects. It is the individual choice that is risk too. And of course, each candidate has different individual characteristics. Who can take risks, what risk and how? That will be important. I would like to end by saying what are the factors that affect the overall success of postgraduate success? The choice of the candidate, the characteristic of the candidate is very important. Then the supervision is very important. How is he or she supervised? The type of supervision quality that the professors at SSB provides, that is very important. And what is the culture at SSBU? So there are three things: the candidates, the supervisors, and the culture together, which will make postgraduate education a success. I would like to remind the supervisors. When I say this, I'm reminding myself too, because I'm a supervisor too. Supervision means you must have clear expectations with your students. They and you must have a clear understanding of what is expected of them and what is expected of you. You are determining and developing their capability, their independence. We are not creating dependent candidates. We are creating independent candidates who can do their own research. We must encourage them to have analytical skills, to think for themselves, not to come to you all the time asking for help. They must have problem-solving skills. And then finally, they must have the ability to integrate their thinking together. These are the types of supervision strategies which I think will be helpful for the professors at SSBU. Of course, you must develop their creativity too. Please encourage them to read widely. Reading is important. Please encourage them to debate, to discuss, to argue. Please discuss to benchmark with other universities, other institutions. Please give time to incubate ideas so that they can reflect on the ideas. Please challenge them during the course of their thesis or dissertation. Please help them with the academic writing skills and methodological skills. That is your task. That is your obligation. Please help them network. Please contact, make sure you are a good mentor. This is the role of the supervisors at SSBU. And make sure that they are prepared for peer review publication in prestigious journals. And finally, I love this. It's like Einstein, but in a different way. Research is what I'm doing when I don't know what I'm doing. So let us make sure that if we know what we're doing, we are not doing research. Because I do not know what I'm doing, this is what is called research. So I thank you for your attention. So I open the floor for any discussion and any question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor, for your very interesting presentation, the lecture. So yeah, now anyone from participant, if you have any question, please raise your hand and make your question concise. Yes, Venerable Sopita.
Thank you so much, Yaif, for your useful presentation. And then I would like to ask one question. I do agree that you said the research is going to take a risk. And I would like to know is deductive research and inductive research, which one it will be easy for us? Because I'm being a student and then we have to choose the easy way. Yeah, thank you, CI.
Thank you for the question. May I frame your question differently? Because when you ask me what is the easy way, I would like to reframe that the question is not whether it is easy or difficult. The question would be, what suits you as a candidate? If you look at your topic, do you think that the topic that you are doing research would be more suitable if you do inductive or if you do deductive? So the choice, I think, would be depends on yourself, depends on your topic. And I'm sure, and I like to encourage you, don't take the easy way out. No, don't go for the easy way. Because by doing the difficult way, you will learn more. It will take more time. You'll be frustrated. But at the end of the day, it will be worthwhile. Because if you choose the easy way, maybe you take less time, but then when you reflect, you feel sorry. Oh, I should not have done it. So I would like to share with you my personal experience. Whenever I have to make a choice, please never think of the easy choice. Please think of the right choice. The right choice might be easy, but sometimes the right choice will be difficult. But then it will be worthwhile. I'll also encourage you to look at the writing of the thesis as your life goal. I think that this is an opportunity for you to put all your academic thoughts into this thesis. You put all your heart and mind into this, and the product you would get is something you would always treasure. You can always look back and tell yourself, it doesn't mean forget about others. I need not tell you, no one else is more important than yourself. Please make sure you are satisfied that you have done your best. If you are happy with this, forget about the rest. Ignore them. What means is you must have the inner strength to believe in yourself. I have chosen the hard way. I've chosen the more difficult way, but this is the right way. And this is something that I will contribute. So I would like to encourage you to take the hard way, maybe the hard way or the soft way, but what is important is the right way. Please look and choose the right way, which will be suitable for your research. Now, I also like to at least indicate to you, if you're doing masters or if you're doing a PhD, this is different. So depending on the type of degree that you are doing, try to make sure and discuss with your supervisors, what is the quality that is expected? This is why the expectations are important. What does the supervisors expect you? What does the university expect you? Because the level of expectations are different from a master's and a doctoral programs. So based on the expectations. Now, if you are a master's student, do not think of trying to do a doctoral thesis. If you are doing a doctoral program, do not think of doing a master's level thesis. So try to look at the type of thesis that you are engaged in and try to make sure that it fits in to your objectives. I hope this will answer your question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for your encouragement and then your very important knowledge. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have a question from Sayale Panyatheri.
Thank you so much for your very fruitful lecture, Sayadi. We learn a lot from you every week. Thank you so much. And my question is, in terms of our Buddhist studies, sometimes some of us, we dream to become a scholar, Buddhist scholar in the field of Buddhism. So my question is, what's the difference between the scholar and the researcher? In terms of Buddhist study, what we are doing now, should we integrate the skills of both researcher and the scholar? May I know your opinion here?
Thank you, Siali, for this very interesting relationship between scholarship and research. If I could share my personal view, that if you are a scholar, the only true way to be a scholar is through research. To me, without research, you cannot exercise scholarship. So for me, to be a true scholar, a Buddhist scholar, I think your basis should be strong research experience, strong research work in form of publications. Because unlike even in Buddhist studies, let me first admit I'm not too very familiar with Buddhist studies as such, and yet I feel that it is not too different from the area that I'm familiar with, which is economics. So if you want to be an economic scholar, the only way you can be a scholar is through research. Without doing your original research, without doing research yourself, you cannot claim to be a scholar, because otherwise you are just copying or repeating or regurgitating what someone else have already done. So to me, the question that you raised, Yali, is very important because it provides us with a benchmark that to be a Buddhist scholar, the essence is research. The essence is research, which means also two things after research. Research not only for its own sake, but research for teaching. So this is why you might remember in my earlier seminar, I talked about the relationship between research and teaching. We often have many institutions where a lot of teaching without research. They are merely regurgitating what they read from the books. So what I hope we can encourage at SSBU is a culture of research and teaching, and of course, also research and publication. So this is why in my first slide, I talk about three things together: teaching, research, and publication. And Siali, if you really want to be a true Buddhist scholar, I think you need three things: research, publication, and teaching. Because the sharing and imparting of knowledge, it's also a measure of scholarship. By doing research but not teaching, you are being very selfish. We are here to share whatever knowledge we have, even though it's a very small knowledge. So the question of sharing through teaching is important. And the way you can teach is through research and through publication. And therefore, Siali, to answer your question, if you really want to be a Buddhist scholar, please focus on these three pillars: the pillars of research, the pillars of publication, and pillars of teaching. And I'm sure in your quest to be a Buddhist scholar, which I would really want to encourage you, we need scholars. Scholars are not rich in terms of money, but we are rich in terms of wisdom and insights. I think this is more important than all the money in the world. To me, money doesn't really matter. What means is insights. And the beauty of being a scholar is the ability and opportunity to share what you know. So please teach whenever you have an occasion and opportunity, because sharing is a sign of humility, that we do not know enough. We are all here to learn together. That's also very important. I think what you have raised, Siali, is what does it mean to be a true scholar? A true scholar is someone who's willing to make mistakes. A true scholar is someone who's willing to admit he or she does not know everything, but willing to learn. A true scholar is someone who is humble, who can work with young people and old people. A true scholar is someone who can work with educated people and illiterate people who do not even know Kaji Kagwe. Because a true scholar is not ignorant or arrogant. A true scholar do not have the arrogance to say, I'm a scholar, I don't deal with the uneducated. So I do hope in your quest that you reach your goal of being a Buddhist scholar. And I would like to encourage you to do this through research, teaching, and publication. Thank you very much, Siali.
Thank you. I have one more question. In terms of research that you talk about, in Buddhism, what I have learned is like we are mostly doing the desk research. Just we read the paper, the books or the articles, and we learn from others' knowledge. But on the other hand, research involves the fieldwork as well. Like, for example, we need to do the research, what is really happening to the Buddhists, or what is happening to the people who are non-Buddhist. Then we can try to introduce what are the Buddhist teachings, something like that. So in terms of scholarship in Buddhist field of Buddhism, I think we really need the fieldwork research rather than the desk research. So that's why we learn a lot from you, from your lectures. Then I come to realize that we have to integrate research, how to do research in terms of the fieldwork, then as well as the learning from the other people, such as the books or articles or something like that. Then we can try to become a Buddhist scholar, research scholar. We can go.
In a way, I think we need both. We need both. We need to have field research. And I think when I was listening, when I attended the 6th anniversary of SSPU, when I listened to the foreign scholars, foreign professors, most of them were basing their research on field studies. So I really encourage that SSBU will be encouraging the candidates at the university to really go into the community, to understand what Buddhism means. For example, how does Buddhism relate to health? What would be very interesting, which would be something that no country in the world can do, is what is the relationship between Buddhism and COVID? How do people, address COVID pandemic through their living as a Buddhist? These are many areas where we can do research. How do you use Buddhism as, a philosophy or religion to address the social issues? How do Buddhists deal with social media? We have not looked into this. So the field is so vast, and please do not think only of sitting in a library and looking at these very important books. Of course, this is something that you do, but I really encourage to look broader. This is where the supervisors becomes very important. Supervisors must have an open mind, that there's no limit on the choice. This is the difficulty I have in my universities. Some of my supervisors, they are very limited. They say, okay, you cannot do this, you cannot do this. There's no such thing as you cannot do this. You can do research in area that you are interested in. The criteria is only one, your interest. Nothing else matters. It is a very selfish, I must admit. Research is very selfish because I want to know. I don't care whether I get credit. I don't care whether I get masters. I don't care whether I get promotion. I care because I want to know. So that search for scholarship, that search, that I want to know, that's my objective and goal. You can achieve this either through field work or spending time in the library. But I do hope that you can spend time not just in the library, but in the museums. For example, how does the Buddhism, which is flourishing in the central Bagan, for example, where the area in Bagan where Buddhism flourished, what is the current people dealing with day-to-day issues? Do they have a sense of Buddhism when they deal with business, for example? What is the relationship? Because I was very interested, because I am an economist, I was very interested in Buddhist economists. How does Buddhism deal with pricing? How does Buddhism deals with business and ethics? These are areas which very few research, and I think scholars should be, interested in looking to it. And I hope the supervisors at SSBU encourage this open-mindedness of looking for different areas of research. Thank you very much, Siali. I have time, Siaro. Don't worry.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Siaji. Thank you very much.
I think there's another hand raised. 2 hands raised.
Sorry, I muted myself. Okay, please, Siali, Associate Professor Dr. Yusanayani, ask your question.
Thank you so much, Siaji, for giving us a very clear picture of how sincere a scholar should be. Then I have 2 interesting points. One point is as a research student, and another point on the basis of a supervisor. So the first one, Siaji, I would like to base on the inductive research, which Venerable Sobita has asked, then which one should be easier for them to pursue. Then I think if I may quote your recent example about the history of Bagan, maybe like when we trace back and look into the cultural, anthropological, and like religious background of Bagan, am I right that we start from the inductive research because we have some observation, then we will try to make a hypothesis, and this is the theory. This is where and by that time how Bagan was. So am I right?
I think you are correct in a sense in terms of field research. But before I answer this, I think the term that you use, I think is very important. As a scholar, we had to be very sincere. Sincerity is very important. Sometimes we overlook the sincerity. We are not sincere. We are not true to yourself. Because at the end of the day, to me, although I'm a practicing Buddhist, I'm not a real good Buddhist. I think we need to look into ourselves. For me, what matters is your inner self. So the question that you raised, the issue that you mentioned, it's a very important issue of sincerity. And I do hope that the inductive process, which is very easier, I would say, that you start from the observation, from the field studies, and then you try to link with the prevailing theory. That could be one way in terms of Bagan or in Pew or elsewhere. Of course, in another situation, you can use a deductive process. So it works both ways, whether you use deductive or inductive. The only thing which is important, I think, for you as a professor, because you are supervising your candidates, that they have a choice, that there are 2 choices that they have, either a deductive or inductive. There's no right way. We cannot say this is much easier or much harder. that it is right and this is wrong. It depends on the choice. It depends on the topic. It depends on the area. So I think as supervisors, I think it would be important for you to lay out to your supervisees that they have this choice of approaches, either deductive or inductive, and you let them make their own choice, and you guide them, and you help them complete the research process they have undertaken. I think as a guide, as a mentor, because you, with your experience in research, you can tell them, what would be more. The other issue, which the other Uzim mentioned, whether it's difficult or easy, is the time constraint. Because all of us have time constraints. You have to finish your thesis in whatever time. And therefore, you cannot think of doing a 5-year thing, because then you'll be too late to submit the thesis. So the question is, as supervisors, you would have to alert the supervisees that this is the time that you have to complete the thesis. And therefore, you cannot just go on forever. Of course, after the degree, then you can do something else. But before that, you have to complete your master's or a PhD in the stated time. And that's the obligation, both of the supervisors and the supervisees. The rest, I hope, once you have inculcated them with the virus of research, they will never be cured in their lives. I'm never cured because I have a research virus in my DNA. So I always think of research first. And I do hope you can, as professors, also, impart this passion and research so that they can carry out the research. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Yaji. How we envy you. Like, you have such a, how do we call this? Very constructive and positive way of saying that you have a virus, and how we can incalculate in them. And yes, my simple point is that I'm just trying to understand myself, Yaji. Between inductive and deductive, when we talk about deductive, it was based on through the existing knowledge or the theory, we try to explore, then we will come to a conclusion. So that is the deductive. And in case of the inductive, that it comes from our curiosity, it would be something new to us, which we explore. Then we check again with the existing theory and we come to conclusion. So I think it's a very good example that you have very clearly shown us. And another point, Siaji, as a supervisor, I wonder how we may help and assist our candidates with the evaluation and creation of the new ideas with reference to your Bloom's taxonomy. Because, of course, we can remembering, understanding, applying, and analyzing. These are not very difficult, where the most important part are evaluation and creation. I think it can be trained in one day, but if any possible way that we can effectively help them assistance and at the same time make them gain their confidence. And
thank you again, because I think that taxonomy of moving from understanding to creation actually is a good example of what to be a scholar really means, which was raised by the other participant. Because as we move, from one step to the other, as we move from the remembering, understanding, analyzing, etc., once we get the evaluation, that we look into, we then evaluate, we measure, and then we then create. So I think this will be the ultimate, that, whatever we teach at universities, we would like to encourage the students to move from remembering, understanding, and then move, as you said, to evaluation and creation. That's the ultimate. And I think I'm still struggling too myself. How do I, evaluate the knowledge or the teachings that I have? And how do I create new knowledge? It's a never-ending journey. So I'm glad you raised this taxonomy. And I do hope that SSBU use this Bloom taxonomy, which I'm sure is available, because it helps us guide in our daily work. Whenever we take a course, take a class, we're there not just to remember facts, but then to move towards creation. Then we are trying to, I would say, generate the new generations. It's not just for us, but people that comes after us. So the question is, we are always ready to encourage the new researchers, new scholars to come on board, and that they themselves are able to evaluate and then create new knowledge. So I think it's to me, it's a very enriching process that as a researcher, as a supervisors, you're working very closely with your supervisees, not just in learning, helping he or she learn, but also learning from him or her. This is, I must tell, please tell Oxford Seattle, I learned a lot, from these seminars. It is not just me sharing, but the question that you raised, the question that were raised, actually helped me sharpen my awareness. It creates new understanding in myself too. So I think this is the beauty of being a scholar in an academic environment like SSBU. So I thank you for raising the question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Siaji.
Thank you. We still have two more questions from Panyatipa. Please. Yeah.
Hi. Good afternoon, Siaji. Here is a Venerable Panyatipa. I don't want to ask questions, but I just want to give some comments, from my own, because I was trained as a medical scientist.
Okay.
So pretty much doing lots of deductive studies in my whole life. When I came to the Buddhist studies, in fact, I had a very difficult time, to really readjust myself, to doing something pretty much inductive. And to me, it's more of like a literature review, not doing any groundbreaking, new discoveries. So, and I was involved in teaching a research methodology course like last year to our postgraduate diploma students. And at that time, I sort of like found out some limitations of the students in knowing, the very, very concept that I think it shouldn't have any problem with me. I don't have any confusion or inability to understand that concept, but the key concept, like what you have just said now, the originality, innovations, orders, that's pretty much very, very new to them, So when I'm trying to really talk about the primary research and secondary research and all this, they cannot understand what are they. And as well as the CLA's peanut theory, as well as of CLA, Dr. Eugenius has pointed out, but inductions and deductions, they are not really so clear about how are they going to do it, I think that some of the background knowledge, foundational knowledge must be there laid down for them to really to step on, right? So I hope that in your subsequent lectures, you could address that more. I'm very, very ecstatic as well to know that you are thinking about how to link Buddhist studies to science, to health, and all this. So it's pretty much what I'm now here working on, empirical and scientific studies of Buddhism. Thank you, Siaji.
Thank you. I think what is important now is multidisciplinary,
right?
Interdisciplinary. In the old days, if you're a medical doctor, you only do medicine and nothing else. Now, you might not know, I served in the Ministry of Health because I'm an economist, but I did my PhD in health economics. So I know more about health than most doctors, because I see health not from the clinical side, but from a more holistic way of looking at health in its very dimensions. But the question is, what we need, I think, is in universities, is interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary approaches. That even a doctor can become a Buddhist scholar, an engineer can become a Buddhist scholar, because you add value to the debate, because you bring your different training, your experience, your outlook, but that would enrich the Buddhist studies and Buddhist scholarship. So I think we should encourage a much wider, group of people coming into the field of Buddhist studies, who are really, because I must admit, if you talk about Buddhist studies, then you get into this, you imagine that it is only for the clergy, the monks and the nuns, or they are involved in religious work, rather than laymen. I do hope we can open up opportunities for engineers, for doctors like you, for economists, because there are wide areas where we can learn. Because at the end of the day, I think this would encourage, new knowledge, original knowledge, creative knowledge, and innovative knowledge. And I really like to encourage you. Please bring your medical experience, please, because you come with a very strong clinical, scientific way of addressing issues. These are the research, and I do hope you would add to the Buddhist scholarship in our country. Thank you very much.
One of the roadblocks of doing scientific research in this country is the funding, because we need a lot of funding and facilities as well. So these are all the pretty much obviously, obstacles that we cannot pass over so far. So
may I share with you my belief, my philosophy, that there are no such thing as challenges, but these are
money.
opportunities. Because money is not a challenge; it is an opportunity.
Okay, thank
you. If you are short of funding, it means that you have opportunity to be creative. You cannot just rely on the usual traditional donors. You have to be creative. You have to work with the business community who are able to fund your research. So again, this is an area, I think, thank you for raising this, because research, even though you have all the interest, if there are no resources available, you cannot do research. You need money. But the question is, you cannot just say, I don't have money. The question is not that I don't have money. The question is, how do I get the money I need? There are many creative ways and original ways of raising funds, even in Myanmar. I speak from experience, and I think we have enough, in our society who are able to fund research. The only problem is we are not reaching out to them. We are not reaching out to them in terms of funding research. We're still relying on the traditional way. Now, let me come back to something that you mentioned, the issue of the mindset of students. You talk about You just
Recording in progress.
Yeah, Dr. Pohai, do you want to ask anything?
If you don't mind, may I ask you, I'm doing the exploratory research and inductive research. And because when I did my MA with the Thammasat University, I took the research methodology for 1 semester, and I learned both quantitative and qualitative, but I'm not good at mathematics, and I have problem with the SPSS licensing, and I lost all the data. So since then, I'm so scared of the quantitative, and I do the qualitative. And I learned, and I want to do here my recent research as the naturalistic inquiry, qualitative and exploratory. But it seems like unfamiliar to all everyone, including my advisor and the committee. So I feel so hopeless and discouraged. But when I listen to your lectures for 3 consecutive weeks, so I feel like my moral support again. So in the future lecture, when you talk about the research methodology, could you please share the naturalistic inquiry as well? Because I'm doing the qualitative research with the exploratory and the inductive research. So I haven't done any PhD, so I don't know what is PhD, but I have been doing the very short conference paper a lot. And also for my university in Bangkok, I did a lot of publication for the university, forced us to do as an academia. So I'm very familiar with the qualitative and the naturalistic, inductive. So please share when you teach that. This is my request. And I feel like hopeful now because you are, something like the rising star coming up to stand up for something. It is discouraged me. So now I feel like encourage myself. Thank you, Sia.
Thank you. In terms of both qualitative and quantitative, I'll be discussing in more detail in terms of methodology. I know that sometimes quantitative research, you talk about SPSS, can be intimidating. But I would like to assure you that it's no big deal. Qualitative research and qualitative research are difficult in their own ways. So please do not think that qualitative research is easy and quantitative research is difficult. It's not the case. In many cases, quantitative research is much easier because you deal with large numbers. You can do statistical analysis. You have the computer software, etc. In many ways, qualitative work is much easier, much more difficult because it is more time consuming. You have to have a lot of patience. You have to talk with your interviewers, etc. You have to do a lot of observations. Whereas if you do big surveys, because as an economist, I do most of my work in quantitative studies. It's easy. It's not difficult. Now with today's technology, we do have the ability to. So I would address both the quantitative and qualitative. And I hope you would look into, because both is important. If you focus only on qualitative without looking into quantitative, or otherwise looking only at quantitative and not looking at qualitative, because qualitative work is very enriching. You go to the heart and you find out the real details, what makes people, think, etc. So I love qualitative work, but at the same time, because I come from the quantitative field, quantitative is what I do. So I would be addressing both qualitative and quantitative research in research methodology. And the other thing about the degree, if you really want academic credentials, degree is important. Not for the sake of a degree, but to get the credentials. You talk about publications. You have done this. But use these experience and enroll in any, you have been in Thailand, Bangkok universities and other universities. We now have online programs where you can get degrees. So the question is, I would like to encourage you because, of course, if you say I'm not interested in degrees, that's another issue. But if you are interested in degrees, the opportunities we now have is something that I never had when I was young. I had to go to UK. I had to spend 6 years to get a PhD. But nowadays, you can do so many, you can even enroll in the degree in any foreign university. It will take time, it will take money, but it is possible. So if you are really interested, because of course, if you say, well, I'm not interested in the degree, that's okay too. So there are many researchers, because if you look at the English academia, many of the professors do not have PhDs, because this is not a requirement in England. But in the US, if you want to be a professor, you have to have a PhD. So you have to have a degree. So it depends on each country. In our country too, nowadays in the universities, unless you have a PhD, you cannot become a professor. That's the rule, and that's the obligation. So if you want to be a professor in a university, you must have a PhD, period. No question asked. But of course, if you don't want to be a professor, you don't need a PhD. So it depends on your life goal, what you want out of life. If you want to be a scholar without getting a degree, it's fine too. It doesn't really matter. You have to live with yourself. If you're comfortable with where you are, I think it's okay too. But I encourage you to keep on doing research, because research really means something that being a true scholar is something that you have to do. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Professor, and thank you everyone for your participation. And now we have already run out of the time.
So next week we meet again, same time.
Yeah. We
will talk the second course. So this will be a 9-week. So we have finished the first week. The first two are foundational seminars. So the course starts today. And please, I will share the slides immediately, and I hope it will be shared to everyone. So Yaro, I hope you would take charge of this. I will send it to you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Professor. Yeah.
Okay.
So see you again next week.
Keep well. Stay safe. Stay healthy.
You too. Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Recording stopped.